Hello and welcome back to my channel. It's Tina, and today we are talking about one of my very favorite things ever. It's audiobook day. So far this year, I've read 126 books, and of those, 80% have been an audiobook. So needless to say, I'm a little bit of an expert in the audiobook arena. I definitely have a lot of experience. So what I want to talk about today is how I read so much, what apps I use when I'm reading on audiobooks, and then also just give you some of my top recommendations. This has been a really good reading year, but I will say probably not my best reading year ever. I've read a lot of good ones, but in order for something to make the very, very best audiobook list, it really has to stand out. It could be the narrator, it could be the production. I have some celebrity narrators in this, so let me tell you a little bit more about why these ones made the list. I have a total of 10. So, a question I get asked a fair amount is, how do you read so much? And one, it's partially my job, right? Obviously, I read for the podcast, I'm reading for social media, and now YouTube. So, it's a good way to give myself an excuse or permission to read, not that you need it. But I really don't do many other things. I don't watch a lot of TV unless it's maybe Real Housewives, but even that I'm really behind on. And reading is my favorite hobby. Specifically, I love sitting with a book when I can, but audiobook and doing things is one of my favorite things to do. I usually finish at least one audiobook a weekend because I'm cooking, cleaning, doing stuff around the house, what have you. And audiobook really just makes this possible. Another tip that I have is to try and put an audiobook in whenever you can. I should say it's a skill, right? It's just like anything else. You're not probably going to be good at it at first because your brain is going to have to get used to figuring out how to do whatever it is, cleaning, we'll say, but also paying attention to the story. So I would say practice. For me, my gateway, I started with podcasts and then I would start to listen to audiobooks. I'm pretty sure I started with nonfiction. That felt like an easier in to me, and I felt like I wouldn't probably read those books in print anyway. Specifically, nonfiction memoir, I think, is a really good way to get started on audiobooks. And then once you train your brain, I think you should be able to get into more complex things. Now, I will literally read anything on audio, does not matter to me. Fiction, nonfiction, memoir, but my very favorite still mystery and thriller. There's something about putting in a quick mystery thriller, lots of twists and turns. It just makes me really happy. Another trick that I have to get more reading into your day to day, if that's something that you want to do, is the one Airpod trick. Obviously, I'm wearing my headphones right now, but the one Airpod trick is something I got from my friend Renee at itsbooktalk. But it's not that hard. You just keep one AirPod in, and what this does, it allows you to partially pay attention to people around you. It allows you to then conserve the battery of your AirPods because you're constantly then switching. If this one dies, you can switch to the other one. And I just find it's a really good way to be able to do more than one thing. I also love my noise canceling headphones when I'm really going in on a task and I know my kids are taken care of, they're elsewhere, they're not going to need me. Full on noise canceling headphones is the absolute best because then I can just sort of tune out and really sink into the book. I also have a job during my day job where I can listen to a fair amount of books or for a fair amount of, minutes throughout the day. There's some admin tasks that I do that don't require talking or, processing a lot. So I can certainly listen to audiobooks during that. And then if you have a commute, I don't commute into work every day. I do some days a week. I take a train. And that is perfect audiobook time. It's almost guaranteed built in hour and a half of audiobook time each way, depending on how long you're commuting. And provided that you don't get distracted by social media, which has been a problem. But in general, I love to be listening to an audiobook on my way to work. And also this applies if you're driving, obviously. Last month, November, I had driven to a couple of events and I was in the car for several hours, a couple days, and it was perfect. I think it was a 9-hour drive over the course of 2 days, and I had a 9-hour book-ish, and I finished that from the beginning of my trip to the very end. I was pulling in, finishing it, and that's my favorite when that time's up like that. These are a few of my tips and tricks on how to get into audiobooks if you're not already. But my guess is if you're here, chances are you're probably already into audiobooks, so let me tell you where I get them. I almost never pay for audiobooks, and my number one app that I use is Libby. Libby is tied to my library card, and it allows me to put holds on both audio as well as ebooks. And I have a couple library cards. I have one in the city I work in, and then in the town that I'm from, and there's like a local library consortium there. So I have a couple of library cards, and it's great. As soon as I see a book I know I'm going to want to do on audio, I'll put a hold on it, and then it comes in, and there you go. You don't have to use an audiobook credit. I also recommend checking to see if your library has what's called Hoopla. Hoopla is another library app. Some libraries have it, some don't, but that one, you get a certain number. I want to say it's like 5 to 7 books, no matter what. You don't have to put a hold on it. If it's in Hoopla, you can download it. And I found a lot of good books there. There's ebooks as well as audiobooks. Because I'm a book influencer, there are a couple of ways that I get audiobooks sent to me. First is through the Penguin Random House Audio Influencer Program. I absolutely love them. They allow us to download up to 10 audiobooks a month, which totally covers me. There's also Libro.fm. They have an audiobook ALC advanced listener program, and they send us, anywhere from 10 to 20 books that we can choose from, and we can download 10 to listen to for that month. And I'm also a member of Simon & Schuster's influencer program for audiobooks. So that sort of takes care of me. Other apps I know people use are Everand, which I hate, and that's a tale for another time, but I'm not a supporter of Everand. And I know people have Audible or Libro FM. I recommend Libro FM. They support indie bookstores as opposed to being owned by Amazon, and they have just about all of the choices that you would get on Audible. But if I'm going to use a credit, it's definitely through Libro. You also could do, if you have Kindle Unlimited, some of their books have both an audio component as well as the ebook, and that goes through Audible as well. So those are just some ways that I get my audiobooks so I can get my fix. If I don't have an audiobook going, I'm very cranky. And I'm telling you, I literally have an audiobook going, meaning I'm at least in the middle of one at all times. Another thing that I think really makes or breaks the audiobook experience are the narrators. And you will come to find the more you get into audiobooks, you'll find who your narrators are. I will share a couple of my very favorites along with one recommendation from me of a book I've read and listened to, and they did a great job on it. First is Ari Filakos. He's my number one favorite audiobook narrator. He doesn't do a ton. He does Nathan Hill's books. So from there, I would recommend The Nix. I also love Saskia Marleveld, and she is a fantastic narrator. She does a lot of Kate Quinn's books. So for that, I recommend The Diamond Eye. You also have Bonnie Turpin. She is one that I've read a lot from, and she has done The Underground Railroad. I remember listening and really enjoying that. You also have J.D. Jackson, who narrated The Violin Conspiracy. He is a favorite as well. So there are a couple of my favorite audiobook narrators in things like Libro FM. You can actually search by audiobook narrator. So that's a good inroads. Once you find a narrator you like, just search them up and see what other books they have narrated. Let me get to the books that I'm going to recommend. In order for books to be a favorite audiobook of the year, they have to bring the characters to life. I, again, will listen to just about any genre on audio, but the audiobook narrator has to do something special for it to stand out on my list, and here are my 10 favorites. I'm going to start with the ones that have single narration, because there's definitely a difference between single narration, multiple narrators, full cast, and celebrity, and that's how I'm going to break it down today. But the recommendation I have for single narration is Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wabashig Rice. And this one is narrated by Billy Marasti. And this one tells the story of an isolated Anishinaabe community in northern Canada that suddenly get cut off completely from the outside world because there's a mysterious power outage. And so this book is all about what would happen if a community that already had everything taken from them gets everything taken from them again, but so does everybody else. They have no way to communicate with other people. They don't have many modern amenities, and it's winter, but they have a lot more than most people do. This is an Own Voices story. I absolutely loved it. And I definitely think this one required an audiobook narrator that was Own Voices as well. So Marasti is a Canadian actor and a writer of Cree descent. And so he does the narration. Oh my gosh, does a fantastic job, because there's a lot of words and a lot of verbiage in here that I would not be able to pronounce on my own. He uses a lot of authentic, vernacular and language, and I just think the narrator did a beautiful job. He has a very odd voice. I will be quite honest with you, so it will take you a minute to get used to it, but I highly recommend it. I also just recently finished the next book in the series, Moon of the Turning Leaves, and for that one, Maristy did the same narration, did another fantastic job. I enjoyed this one a lot. I mean, this one is close to a 5-star read. Turning Leaves was good. I was glad to have it because it picks up 10 years later after this one ends, and I was really curious to see what happened to the characters. But overall, recommend this on audio. Next up with single narration is Missing White Woman by Kelly Garrett, and this one is about a woman named Brianna who wakes up on a romantic New York getaway to find that her partner is missing. And there was a dead white woman in their foyer, in their rental home. And this is a big problem. Brianna's Black, her boyfriend is Black, and he is now missing. And this forces her to figure out what the hell happened? Where's her boyfriend? She gets into a media frenzy, of course, as a police investigation while desperately trying to figure out who the hell the woman is in their foyer. And she also talks a lot about the bias and this thing called the missing white woman syndrome, where a beautiful missing white woman gets a ton more press than maybe some more marginalized individuals who had the same thing happen to them. So it's about societal bias. And I think this book is really interesting. What I think the audiobook narrator did really well with this is that, or I should say the production, the character is questioning her sanity a lot. She's kind of wondering, did I imagine this? What on earth happened here? What's going on? And so she's sort of questioning herself. And I remember they used this echo feature when the woman was talking to herself and, having this internal dialogue and trying to figure out if she was involved and what happened. I just remember they did a really good job. It also, the case goes viral. And so you have a lot of interesting commentary from the peanut gallery. So I highly recommend this one. I thought it was a good time. The final single narrator that I have is William by Mason Coley. This one was narrated by Honey St. Dennis. And this book is odd. I read it at the beginning of September to kick off spooky season, and it is psychological horror meets cyber noir. And what does that mean, right? It is about what would happen if the AI was the monster in this story. And it's a one-sit read for sure. It's about this man, Henry, who is an engineer. He is brilliant, and he spends tons of hours in his home trying to work on his job, trying to work on sentient AI. That's sort of the goal that he has for himself. And he has a breakthrough. He achieves what it is he hoped to achieve. He's given up a lot of himself to get that process going. He has become a bit of an agoraphobe. And so his wife one day decides to invite some people from her work to come in and meet him and talk about his work. And while they're there, things get pretty crazy. This one had some great surprises, but I enjoyed the audio. I don't exactly remember what made me say this one stands out on audio, but I think it does some interesting things with the voices of potential AI side characters, but highly recommend this one. It's creepy. It's definitely not like over the top horror. So even if you're a more sensitive reader, I still think this one could work for you. All right, now we're in the multiple narrators category. And this one is a book I read way back in January, and I knew immediately it's going to make my list of best audiobooks. It is One of the Good Guys by Araminta Hall. This one's narrated by Elliot Fitzpatrick, Olivia Vinal, and Helen Keeley. It's about this man named Cole. He is a man who considers himself to be a good guy. He is recently separated from his wife, and he's seeking a fresh start in a new town. It's this remote coastal town, and he's trying to start over. He's sort of keeping to himself, but he ends up making friends with some folks that he runs into in this new town, and two young female activists are passing through town. And these women have a lot to say about masculinity. They have a lot to say about power dynamics between genders, and he gets entangled into something that goes viral. And the narrator of this one, the narrators of this one put on a performance. You get commentary from the peanut gallery when the story goes viral. I feel like that really, really added to the story. I also really enjoyed the story itself. It surprised me quite a bit, and I just thought it was interesting. I like Araminta Hall. She does psychological suspense really well. Sort of reminds me of Paula Hawkins, by the way, if you're wondering what I'm wearing. It says "Staying Sane is a Trick." I was actually gifted this by the Paula Hawkins' team at Mariner Books. And I just thought, oh, what a fantastic sweater. Anyway, that's what this says. But I recommend One of the Good Guys. Another thriller that I recommend is Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. This one is narrated by January Lavoie and Will Damrim. And I loved this book. I thought it was so smart. It's a thriller though, okay? So like I'm a thriller lover. I say, I loved this. It's not the, most intellectually stimulating book of 2024, but I thought it was really interesting. It's about this woman named Lucy who long ago was accused of murdering her best friend. Everyone in town believes that she's a killer. She moves away to, get away from everybody basically, because she has no recollection of what happened to that night. Her grandma calls her to come back to town because somebody is back in their small hometown in Texas to investigate, and they're doing a podcast about the case. So she's forced to return to the scene of the crime to help solve her best friend's murder and figure out what really happened. This book is told between clips of podcast episodes because the guy's a podcaster, and it's also told, obviously in the moment and a little bit of flashback. I loved the characters for this. The main character, Lucy, is kind of a you want her to, she's kind of self-destructive, right? And I want her to fight more for herself, but I thought she was really interesting to follow. I also love this woman's grandmother. She was a fantastic side character. Something that worked for me is that she hears her best friend's voice. Again, another unreliable narrator. I think it worked better in audio. It would be totally weird. It's weird in general, but I accepted it because I think the audio did a good job with it. Overall, this one had some twists and turns, and I thought it was a good time. Another one that has multiple narrators is The Butcher by Jennifer Hillier. And I think this one was just redone on audio recently because I got it through my Simon & Schuster audiobook influencer app. But the book itself is older. I think this one came out in 2011, I want to say. I don't know, 2014. And this one is about a serial killer. There were a rash of serial murders that plagued Seattle until the infamous Beacon Hill Butcher was finally hunted down and killed by this man named Edward Shank in 1985, right? The case has been cold since then. It's 30 years later. Shank is retiring from being the police chief. He's now widowed, and he's reluctantly giving up his large, rambling Victorian home to his grandson that he helped raise. His wife has passed away, and he's like, you know what? I need to move into a retirement facility. He can't handle the house by himself. And when Matt moves in, he tries to make it his own, and he discovers some stuff that is there. I loved this book. I thought it was so fantastic. Earlier, when I was telling you about the road trip that I took, where I drove for something like 9 hours, listened to an audiobook, and was entertained the entire time, that was The Butcher. This one's brutal. If you are a sensitive reader, do not read it because it's definitely gory. But I thought it was so smart. You get 3 point of views in this one. You get that of Matthew, you get the ex-police chief, you get Matthew's girlfriend, and I thought this one was fantastic. It might be my favorite thriller of 2024. Unclear. I have to think about it. But either way, the audiobook, highly recommend. My Darlings by Marie Still. This one is another book about a serial killer who hides behind her role as a mother, philanthropist, and PTA president. This book is bonkers. It is very easy to read. It's sort of silly. They call it Desperate Housewives meets Dexter. I totally agree with that comp. And this one has multiple narrators. And I couldn't pin down the one that I thought was the most engaging. The reason why I liked her the best, I'm going to try and imitate her because she says things that are just interesting, like the way that she delivered some of the characters' lines. That's fine. I can put my shirt back on now if you insist. She growls and talks close to the mic and just really puts on this performance. And I wish I knew which one of the women listed it was. Zora Johnson, Megan Tussing, Kathy Bentz, Erin Bennett, various narrators, Kelly Tager. There were a lot, but either way, it's not this book, by the way. It's this one. But My Darlings was excellent. It's silly. You have to sort of take it with a grain of salt. But again, I thought it was a good time. An audiobook that I recommend. It's definitely a story that I recommend. If you're sort of in a reading slump, this one could be a good one to help get you out of it. All right. Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay is one that has full cast narration. Full cast is a little bit different from 2 or 3 narrators. You're getting many, many narrators. Horror Movie, I'm looking quickly, has my favorite Ari Filakos, and it has 12 others. So you're definitely getting a lot of different points of view in this one. This might be the best production audiobook that I've heard this year. And it's about this unnamed man known only as the Thin Kid, who is the sole surviving cast member from a troubled, never released cult classic film that was shot when he was younger, when he played this mysterious masked character. Now it's many years later, and he's trying to reprieve his role in Hollywood. They want to reboot the movie, and the movie didn't come out for a very good reason. So now he's forced to rethink his past and the trauma that he went through, but also he needs money, and he's sort of into the idea of rebooting it so long as he can have a role and have some creative control. This one is excellent on audio. This one, you're getting a production. You're getting pages as they turn from the cast members, as they're going through the script. You're hearing them touching their books. Interesting. Really, really interesting. The story itself was fine. I'd give it like a 3, but the production was a 5, so I'm rounding it to like a 4-ish overall, but very, very interesting story. Great for Halloween time. All right, I'll wrap things up with my last category, which are TV actors / movie actors. I think if you're new to audio, this could be a good entrance point because a lot of the time these people are very talented. You've heard them before, and it sort of allows you to pay attention, I think. The recommendation I'm going to start with is Margo's Got Money Troubles by Ruthie Thorpe. I loved this book. Margo is such a fantastic character. Ruthie Thorpe is an author that I want to be friends with. She just seems really cool. And honestly, Margo is one of those characters that really stood out for me from 2024. She is a woman who gets pregnant, and she's in college. She's pregnant by a guy that wants nothing to do with the child, so she decides to have it on her own. Then her estranged father, Jinx, shows up on her doorstep, moves in with her, and she sort of has to figure out, okay, what am I going to do for work? What am I going to do with my father? We've been estranged, but she comes up with a plan to make money. That is a very modern idea, and I think this one has so much to say about how women are treated as mothers. They're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. There's really no way to win. So I don't know. I think this one is very current, and the author had a lot of respect for the industry she's talking about in this book. There's also some advice from the wrestling world. I don't care for wrestling, but clearly the author did her research, and I think this one was such a good time. This is narrated by Elle Fanning, and that's important because, one, she does a great job, but also in the adaptation, Elle Fanning is going to play Margo. So I think that's such a fun tie-in. Another book that was read by celebrity is From Here to the Great Unknown by Lisa Marie Presley and Riley Keough. This one is narrated by Riley Keough, who's Lisa Marie's daughter, but also Julia Roberts. So this book explores the lives of the Presley family through the lens of grief, addiction, and motherhood, and it's about Lisa Marie's life. She talks about her time at Graceland, and unfortunately, she died before they were able to finish this. And so her daughter relied a lot on tapes and previous interviews to finish this up. She talks about her life at Graceland. She talks a lot about her father, her struggles with addiction, her relationship with Michael Jackson, and unfortunately, the death of her son, who dies not too far before she passes away. But I like this print book. I'm glad that I picked up a copy because it's got some pictures in it as well. It's also really big print. So if you're somebody, I'm actually giving this as a gift. But anyway, I digress. I think this is really well done because Julia Roberts narrates Lisa Marie Presley's sections. So you get some sections from Lisa Marie. You get some sections from Riley Keough, her daughter, who narrates them herself. Overall, I thought this was absolutely fascinating. It's short. Possibly I would have loved more, but like also you can only give so much. You can only give what you give. I still think this one's really good. It's short, and I recommend, even if you're not like sure if you're a Presley fan, give it a shot. I thought this one was very interesting and very juicy. That's it. I'm a little bit sad, I have to say. I'm sad that I'm done talking about audiobooks. I'll have to definitely come back and do another audiobook video, maybe where I'm sharing my favorite audiobook narrators or what have you. But let me know what you think. Are you an audiobook person? If not, why not? If so, give me some recommendations. I'm always down for really, really solid books on audio. Thanks so much for being here, and I will see you next time. Bye. God, I hope the audio worked. There are also audiobooks on your library card, so you can use Hoopla, and then you just download the app. No, I'm saying the wrong one. It's Libby.